Welcome to another episode of the MacGuffin podcast, the movie review podcast that dreams are made of. Keith Foster, you are from San Diego, California.
Cassidy Robinson, you are recording in an undisclosed location in the Rocky Mountains.
And not only are you from San Diego, you were celebrating San Diego Comic-Con just this last weekend. One of the reasons, when was the last time we did a show? I don't even know anymore. One of the reasons we didn't do a show, if we didn't, apparently everybody caught you in cosplay and decided to feature you in their articles this year.
Yeah. This year, me and my wife and our group of friends, we actually did 3 separate cosplay sort of events this year. We did, everybody did some version of Barbie and or Ken. Ashley was astronaut Barbie. I was astronaut Ken. That got a lot of attention. We did that on preview night, which is sort of the kickoff of Comic-Con, and nobody else was in cosplay. So I think that's a big reason why we stood out. There was not a lot of cosplay on preview night. One day, a big group of us did Spider-Man villains. That was a lot of fun. We got a lot of attention for that. And then on the final night of Comic-Con, they had this event called the Hellfire Gala. Are you familiar with what's going on in the X-Men comics at all?
No, I saw that they were doing a Hellfire thing that you went to, but I didn't know that it was directly tied in with something that Marvel is doing right now.
Yeah, so for the past few years in the X-Men comics, writer Jonathan Hickman took over, and it took like sort of a radical change. And the X-Men, all of the mutants, all mutant kind has sort of united and made a utopia on Krakoa, the living mutant island.
Oh, they're going all the way back.
Oh, all the way back.
This is like Chris Claremont's greatest hits.
Man, it's such a great story. I highly recommend checking out. I believe it's called Powers of X, and I can't remember what the other. It's Powers of X and something else of X, and
the new Twitter moniker.
Yeah, it relaunched X-Men in a big way. Oh, I get what you're doing. Shut up. Anyway, so they have this event in the comic books called the Hellfire Gala, where they sort of pick the mutant leaders, and it's this big party, and it's the mutants version of a Met Gala. So everybody, all the artists come up with these crazy, like, high fashion looks. And so that was kind of the theme of this, was a real life Hellfire Gala. And so we all did like sort of high fashion X-Men looks. And that was also a lot of fun. It was a very interesting year at Comic-Con this year because the movie studios were not involved at all. Actually, a lot of them had pulled out a couple months ago when the writer's strike started. Right. And then what panels they did have, most of them got canceled after the announcement of the SAG-AFTRA strikes, because all of a sudden there was no star power to promote these panels, so the actors can't come out and promote the movies and whatnot. So it was just kind of a different year for Comic-Con. No huge Marvel announcements. I believe there was supposed to be like a Dune preview panel. We did get to see a panel for the new Ninja Turtles movie. And instead of having all the celebrities come out and talk to us, they just showed us like a 20-minute clip. So like a third of the movie, basically. And I'm very excited for it. From the clip they showed us, I think it's going to be huge for reinventing the Ninja Turtles. Other than that, it was just, there was a lot of comic book stuff, which was really cool. A lot of smaller panels, which normally wouldn't get any attention, got a lot more attention.
Yeah.
Like the 6AB rooms were turning people away. And yeah, it was a lot more like episode screenings in lieu of panels and that kind of thing. And just a lot of cosplay. And we kept getting interviewed by all these publications, asking us, oh, well, has Hollywood leaving Comic-Con like ruined the con for you and all at all? And the thing I'll say about that is it's bittersweet. I like to go to the big movie panels. I like to hear all the announcements and see the trailers and that sort of thing. And I get a little annoyed at the people rolling their eyes like, oh, imagine a Comic-Con based on comics, where Comic-Con has always been a pop culture con. It has always been about more
Mm,
than just comics. Dude,
not always, not always, always. I mean, in the
they
last,
fucking
like,
had a panel for Star Wars in the 70s, bro. Like, it
okay.
has always been about, like, movies and stuff just weren't as genre specific as they have been the last few years. So I get very annoyed at people acting like movies are not a part of Comic-Con. They've always been there in some way. There's always been screenings and small announcements and things like that. Um so do I think that's a bummer? Yes, it is a bummer, but I absolutely support the SAG strikes and the writer
Sure.
strike. And, I think it was worth it. Like, hold out, get a fucking fair deal. Literally the fate of the industry depends on the industry changing. Um so
So,
yeah, that was kind
how
of a
many
bummer.
publications did you end up getting featured in, either as photos or in interviews?
Quite a few. We the San Diego Tribune, we were actually featured for both the Barbie and the Spider-Man villains cosplay. The LA Times interviewed us, Screen Rant, and a whole bunch of other ones that I couldn't even keep track of. Gizmodo um, got some photos of our group. I wasn't in those ones specifically because I went off to get food at that point, but like all day long we were just seeing like press badges and getting stopped to take photos. So yeah, it was that. So that was the point I was getting to, is it's bittersweet that the movies could not physically have a presence there. But the rest of the con was still great. It was still a lot of fun. um, we had a great time cosplaying. The convention floor seemed no different. There was just as much stuff to do, and swag given out, and there were offsite activations, and all of that stuff was really cool. So to me, it just proved that the movie studios need con more than con needs the movie studios. Like, Comic-Con will survive.
Well, I see. I've always kind of figured since D23 or whatever it's called, um, the Disney one,
Yeah.
and CinemaCon and these kind of things have started. I feel like it's sort of only a matter of time till they start doing their own thing at a different time of the year and become less reliant on previewing everything at Comic Con.
Oh, sure. Well, so yeah, I mean, ever since like when Comic Con went online for the pandemic, that was when like DC Fandom launched, and
Mm-hmm.
Netflix has their like weird little Witcher con that they try to do. But here's the thing. To me, the new con craze is just like all of these people trying to make their own streaming services, right? Like, they're
Right.
not all going to be successful. And
Well,
Comic
right
Con,
now, like, I don't know how the Disney one works, but
mm,
CinemaCon is kind of like invite only. Like,
sure,
it's more for press right now than it is for the general audience. But I think
that
they want
makes
to expand to
sense.
that at some point. Um,
Well, the thing is about Comic-Con specifically though, is it's not specifically tied to any one
mhm.
like industry or property, right? Like D23 is it's fun. We went last year. We had a good time, but it still feels small in comparison because they can only show Disney properties. They can only deal with, which is a lot. They have Disney, they have Star Wars, they have Pixar, they have Marvel,
Right.
but Comic Con isn't limited to any single brand or, they're just like, we just want all the nerd shit.
Mm.
Whereas DC fandom, like the DC cinematic universe, it's like DC as a bankable property is struggling right now. It's very hard for me to imagine they will continue to be successful trying to build up hype in their own fucking convention for movies that nobody wants to see. Like, you need to reach those outside audiences, and that's something that Comic-Con is good at. And I think that's why a lot of these other cons will never sort of get as big. Plus, Comic Con has the support of the entire city. Like, all of downtown transforms with these offsites and activations and banners and ads in a way that I've never seen at any other convention center. And I've been to ones in LA, I've been to Anaheim's WonderCon, I've been to New York Comic Con. They're all just sort of isolated in comparison.
Right. I mean, that's like the mothership.
Yeah,
But I mean, I also feel like because there's more individual conventions, like now there's one in Salt Lake, there's one in
sure.
Boise, Seattle, Portland. Every major city pretty much has a convention, a comic convention that's, if not directly owned by the Comic Con company or ran by the Comic Con company,
No,
then
they're all different companies. Like the
well,
the one in
LA Comic Con is run by the
no,
same one, and I
no
think so's WonderCon.
WonderCon is the only other one that they do. Like they actually sued Salt Lake Comic Con because they were calling it Salt Lake Comic Con. Now they have to call it Fan Expo.
Oh, that's right.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, that's the other thing is, there is still thousands of press at Comic Con that I don't hear about, Salt Lake's Fan Expo all week long when it happens. And
Mm.
even a year like this year when there weren't any huge announcements, I still was getting Comic-Con updates every day. It's still getting major press coverage. It's still the biggest brand. So I just think that to me it's kind of silly to see all this sort of, hand wringing about the movies not being there. It was a great con, a lot of fun, and they focused on other stuff. There was a huge focus on video games this year, which was cool, and I would love to see
That
them
makes
kind of
sense.
push
Yeah.
a little bit more going forward. So, yeah, I think Comic Con, it survived the pandemic. I think it can survive the strike.
And if people want to see photos of you in your cosplay and some of the activations you went to, they can go to our Instagram, instagram.com/MacGuffinPod. I was posting that through the weekend. You were sending me stuff. They can
Yeah,
also go
I'll
to
post some
yours.
onto. I haven't really posted a lot on mine, but I plan on doing like a big dump, like a Comic Con dump soon of just all the cool shit I saw. So
Cool. Well, we should talk about the biggest movie, or one of the biggest movies of the year, don't you think?
yeah, I mean, I think it will be the biggest movie of the year. We said this a couple weeks ago. Um, I said this movie's going to make $1 billion. I was not being hyperbolic. I think
Yeah.
it will make $1 billion.
I think so far it is like one of the highest grossing movies of all time.
Yep.
And it's only been out for a few weekends or so.
What one? Yeah, and not yeah. It came out officially last weekend.
And I'm burying the lead here, but of course, we are talking about the Barbie film.
Mm-hmm.
And this last weekend was the weekend of Barbenheimer, which was this marketing scheme that was thought up by somebody because Oppenheimer and Barbie were both
Have
coming
you
out
heard
on the
the
same weekend.
Have you heard the backstory behind this? I don't know how true it is,
Is there a backstory?
but
I think they just both were playing
oh,
like
oh,
weekend opening chicken to see who was going to back out first, and neither of them did.
so the story that is circulating online, and again, I don't know how much credence to give this, is Barbie was produced by Warner Brothers,
Mm-hmm.
and Christopher Nolan left Warner Brothers, that he had been longtime collaborators with. So the story is that Barbie set their release date intentionally on the same weekend as Oppenheimer to try and bury Oppenheimer, but unintentionally created this viral marketing campaign, which has made both movies probably more successful than they would have been individually.
I think that's certainly the case for Oppenheimer. I'm not sold that that was the case for Barbie. I think Barbie was going to do really well regardless.
I agree, but I don't think it hurts it at all. I think
No,
I do think the double feature uh meme crowd is there, and probably people tried to squeeze it into one weekend when they maybe would have seen Oppenheimer first and then Barbie later. You know what I mean?
I agree. Yeah, I definitely agree. And I also think that, Hollywood should not learn the wrong lesson from this.
Oh my, they
This
already
is
have. The CEO of Mattel has already been like, "Oh hell yeah, we're making a Barney movie, we're making an Uno movie, we're making Polly Pocket, directed by Lena Dunham." Like they did not understand why people have connected with this movie in any way. They're just like, "You people like toys."
right, right. Yeah, that's kind of what it seems like. But it's also, I'm not necessarily just talking about that. I'm also talking about the idea of studios trying to create a viral scheme by
Oh,
pitting movies against each other.
100%.
That is like
They
rolling the dice, and you're
they they are working on Morbius 2 right now, Morbin Boogaloo. Uh
right.
because yeah, they do not understand that this
And they'll
it
open
was
like opposite Dune 2 or something. And
yeah,
like
they do not understand that this was just sort of an organic, fun,
one off
like
kind of
meme
freak
come to
thing.
life that
Yeah.
yeah, it absolutely. You got the pink, you got the gray, the black and white. Like it made itself. It will not work with any other movies. Like it's just a weird thing that happened. That's a lot of fun, and you cannot engineer that. I don't care how many fucking degrees you have in marketing.
Well, they're going to try, and they're unfortunately some movies are going to unnecessarily flop because of
Yeah, and
them.
there's going to be some very unbearable marketing campaigns too for the next few years.
Yeah, yeah. It is definitely not Morbin time, and it wasn't when they tried to do that.
But it is Barbin time, so let's talk about the movie of the hour.
Sure,
Do you want to set it up, or do you want me to?
I can set it up. So,
Okay.
Barbie is the film directed by Greta Gerwig and is co-written by Gerwig and her partner slash longtime collaborator, Noah Baumbach. And together they brought to life the world of Barbie as we know it from every generation, from the first Barbie that was ever created in the, was it early 60s, late 50s? all the way up till the most current merchandising that's come out of Mattel. And this kind of takes place in sort of like an elf-like fish out of water deal, where you have Barbie, played by Margot Robbie. She lives in Barbie Land, where everyone is Barbie happy, and they sing songs, and they go to the beach, and they pretend to eat lunch and dinner every night, and have dance parties and girls' nights. And everything is hunky-dory in Barbie Land until one day she starts to have these existential dilemmas in her mind about death and aging and the meaning of it all. And she also noticed some physical differences. Now she's developing cellulite, and her feet, instead of that perfect pointed angle that all Barbie feet are in so they can go into high heels, are now flat. And to get answers, she visits Weird Barbie, as played by Kate McKinnon from Saturday Night Live. And she informs her that there is sort of break in the universe where her owner in the real world is experiencing these sad feelings and transferring them to her. So she decides she's going to travel to the real world from Barbie Land to figure out what's going on. On the B plot, we also have Ken, as played by Ryan Gosling. And he, along with all the other Kens on the Barbie world, their sole purpose is to sort of bring positive energy and admiration to the other Barbies. And being the puppy dog, doting, clueless dork that he is, he decides he's going to stow away with Margot Robbie's Barbie to the real world and try to impress her with his Ken-ness. Once they go
his
through
Kinergy, if you will.
I will. Usually I don't, but this time I will. Eventually they end up in Southern California, Santa Monica Beach, and fish out of water comedy ensues. They make their way to the headquarters of Mattel and figure out the kind of what's going on in regards to Barbie's owner and her sudden fears about death. And Ken also realizes that in the human world, the men of society have a lot more social currency than they do in Barbie Land. So that kind of creates a rift. You know, how many times am I going to bring up Back to the Future 2 this year? Because I'm like, oh, this is Biff world now.
Sure.
But yeah, this is very fun, very imaginative.
Yeah, I don't think it's as parallel as some of the other ones we brought up, but yeah.
There's no time travel being had here, but there is kind of it came to mind.
Yeah, there's this element of Barbie Land gets changed and Barbie has to sort of come back and put things right.
Right. I was kind of interested in this movie from the get-go, even before Greta Gerwig was involved, because it's gone through many iterations. At one point, it was going to be Amy Schumer in the role.
Yeah, and she was working with Diablo Cody, actually.
Yeah. And then there were some creative differences between her and the studio. They decided to go another direction. They somehow ended up with Baumbach and Gerwig. And,
Well,
know,
I know that Barbie, as a like Mattel, is very protective
protected.
of the
Yeah.
Barbie brand. Um, so I can see why, maybe Amy Schumer wasn't
The
the
right fit.
right fit. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just because, Amy Schumer is very edgy and she's going to push things. And
Hmm.
I mean, I'm actually surprised there were some jokes that made it into this cut of the movie.
Oh, I
Um,
think it earns its PG-13.
yeah,
You know, it's not entirely. I mean, this isn't a kiddie movie. It's.
mhm.
I think for 8 plus, it's probably fine, and a lot of the adult humor will go over most kids' heads. But there's some, there's some spicy meatballs every once in a while in this movie. They don't hold back on some of the suggestive stuff, and
No,
certainly a
yeah.
lot of the thematic stuff is pretty sophisticated. Um,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I
I
walked into this movie kind of excited about it because, for one, I really like Greta Gerwig. I've been a fan of her since the Mumblecore era of Greta
mhm,
Gerwig, like way back when she was in movies that were made by the Duplass brothers for $2. Um,
mhm.
and I've really liked her work with Noah Baumbach, like Frances Ha, and I've also, I believe, Lady Bird was my favorite movie the year that it came out.
Mhm.
Um, so big fan of Greta Gerwig, and it's been interesting watching her interviews with this and them talking to her about her cinematic influences because it's all over the map. I mean, the movie begins with a Kubrick reference to
Yeah.
2001: Space Odyssey, but there's also references to like The Umbrellas of Cherbourg and the movies like by the Archers, like The Red Shoes, and some of the Technicolor like musical comedies from the 50s. And she, you can feel that sort of cine literate nature of the production value of this movie. And I also like that, it would have been really easy for a less um I don't know, a less creative director to just sort of CGI everything. And I like that she really took the initiative to use real sets and practical as much as possible and to
Yeah,
embrace the artifice. In a weird
there's
way,
a tactile quality to it that it it you Barbie Land has this sort of plastic feel, which
right.
I don't think you could have necessarily gotten if it was all digitally done or all you know green screen. I think
Yeah,
we needed to see them interacting with the dream houses and the plastic beach and that kind of thing. I
right.
agree, it added this layer of just texture that made it more believable that this is a this land of living dolls.
Right. And Gerwig's background even before film was in theater, and I think she brings a lot of that to her set design and
Sure.
her knowledge of sets. Like
Well, you could. I mean,
she uses
there will
lots of.
absolutely be a musical version of Barbie on Broadway within the next 15 years, right? Like
Oh, sure,
that
yeah.
will happen, but you can see it with the Dream House.
I mean, this movie has like big musical, like Busby Berkeley style musical numbers in it.
Absolutely.
But I'm talking about like even like small details, like okay, so you want everything to appear pink, but you want to use certain shades of pink so that you
Hmm.
can layer up with all of these flat backgrounds.
Yeah,
And in a way, it kind of reminds me of what we were talking about with Asteroid City and this sort of embrace of artifice,
sure. Totally. Yeah.
and the use of color and the use of props and not shying away from the unreality of things. So those are my opening statements. What were your initial impressions of Barbie? Because you just watched it, didn't you?
Yeah, I watched it last night. I mean, there's some stuff I'm still kind of settling on, but my overall thought is this movie is big and campy, but in a good way and in an intentional way.
Mm-hmm.
It's brassy, it's bold, uh, and I think I think the thing that really sells this movie is our two leads, Margot Robbie and Ryan Gosling, bring so much heart and life to this movie that it would be very easy for people to phone in a movie like this, and neither of them are. They are both like swinging for the fences.
Well, Margot Robbie is very good at, if you think about, her major featured career that she's,
Mm-hmm.
made since coming from Australia to here and making movies starting with like Wolf of Wall Street to this. I mean, obviously she looks the part. She's gorgeous, blonde, and can, she has big eyes, big smile.
Mm-hmm.
She has those sort of features already, so that works. But she also plays this kind of, dopey optimism really well. I
Yeah,
think I don't think it was an accident that they cast Will Ferrell as the CEO of Mattel, given the parallels between a movie like this and Elf.
oh yeah, I mean also the Lego movie, like
Yeah.
he's kind of reprising his role from that in a way. Yeah, I don't think that's an accident at all. Yeah, but and she does have the perfect Barbie look, but it also like I like that the movie itself is very funny, but it still challenges this idea of what Barbie is and what Barbie should be and what Barbie can represent, and
Well,
deals with
that
these kind.
question in and of itself has been tackled almost every generation. Barbie's had kind of
Yeah,
had a I mean, it's always been a very successful toy line regardless, but there's always been discourse around, is she an aspirational feminist icon or is she a problematic beauty icon?
yeah,
And
yeah,
they've never
and
really
this
settled
movie
on that.
like, and I love that the movie approaches that head on. Like the movie is having that argument out loud throughout the entire runtime. Is it problematic or is it? Yeah, exactly. And I love that they are able to have that conversation but still give us a character arc,
Mm-hmm.
and that she is able to, as an actor, internalize that, and we see that struggle in real time just on her face,
Yeah.
let alone all of the other stuff. um and same thing with Ryan Gosling as Ken. Like it would be very easy, I think, for again another actor to just sort of play a foil. Um, but he is making all of these bold choices and this big broad performance that just like fits perfectly in tone with the rest of the movie.
Oh, I mean, for my money's worth, Ryan Gosling's the MVP of the movie because uh he spent so much of his career trying to not be this.
Yeah.
Like he very rarely played like the good-looking boyfriend, or like he kind of started out, he started out from the Mickey Mouse Club,
Mm-hmm.
and then he grew out of that quickly. And when he started, and he was in some sports movies and things like that, and then he quickly, started making very serious dramas about very troubled people.
Mm-hmm.
And it seemed like he was like running the other direction from just being typecast as a pretty boy. In this
Mm-hmm.
movie, it's almost like he was given the instruction, like, be exactly what you don't want people to think you are. Like, and
Absolutely,
be
yeah.
it 100%, and like be the almost a mocking version of what you were originally afraid you were going to get pigeonholed as.
Abs- but yes, I mean, absolutely. And he also does it again in this way that it never becomes so arch to the point where you lose touch with him as a character. Like, he also still has this sort of internal struggle that he's playing. Granted, a lot of the time is played for laughs, but like, you can still feel Ken's pain behind all of the stupid jokes, uh which aren't, they're not stupid, they're actually really clever jokes, but underneath that you can still feel for this guy, you can still relate to that, and to me
Yeah,
that is a challenge.
yeah. I mean, I think he's just a great actor in that way. I think he's also hilarious. His line delivery
Absolutely.
is some of my favorite in the movie.
Oh,
Um,
he
it's
has
so
some
so
moments that
refreshing to
are,
see him have this much fun on screen.
yeah, to just cut loose.
And I also
um
really like the supporting cast of the other Kens as well.
mhm.
Uh, was it
Yeah, we got Simu
Simu
Liu
Liu?
as his sort of rival Ken, Kingsley Benadir, Nkuti Gatwa, and also like, we cannot forget a little shout out to Michael Cera as Alan,
Right,
one of Michael Cera's best roles in a minute.
correct. Yeah, I was pleasantly surprised by his feature in the movie. Um, okay, so those are the initial impressions, and I think it lives up to the hype, and
Mm-hmm.
it's also an effective comedy, and that's what I wanted from it the most is like, please just be funny and do well because there aren't big budget comedies anymore.
Yeah, and that
And
was the thing I was afraid of, was like, is the Barbie hype so much that this movie's going to do well, even if it's not funny, even if it's not good? That was my real fear, is like, I just, like you said, I just wanted it to be funny.
right, I agree. One of and I think that it accomplishes that perfectly. With that said, I don't love this movie without reservations. Um, I do think that the first 2/3 are a blast, and then the
Mm-hmm.
movie it has to get to the meat. It has to get to the thematic stuff that it's been building up to, and I thought that the movie was doing really well with all of that. The arguments about the feminist subtext of Barbie, and the gender politics between her and Ken in the Barbie land, and uh, all of the existential questions about you know what it means to be an icon for different generations, and maybe a younger generation doesn't find that version of femininity as exciting anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And then I feel like the movie sort of loses its nerve a little bit on being able to tell without, or being able to show without telling. And then by the last third of the movie, there's a lot of preaching and there's a lot of speechifying where characters are just outright, you know, saying what the movie's about. and in a very unsubtle and sometimes unfunny way. Um, and and then when we get to the climax of the movie, the big finale, I'm not going to say what it is, but it heads in some meta territory.
Mm-hmm.
There was supposed to be this big emotional beat that I just didn't feel because I felt like the movie abandoned Barbie's personal journey halfway through the movie to go more into uh the uh thematic gesturing, and then
Um,
tried to catch up with itself by the last like 5 minutes and say, "Oh, but remember, remember when she was thinking about death? Well, now we have to kind of come back to that." And so it's really, and there's a lot that's been said about how people are taking this movie. Of course, it's a culture war because everything fucking is. Um, and I'm not having that argument. I see the value of the things the movie's trying to say. I just wish sometimes it had said it a little more artfully, and had also um, kept the comedy in the forefront and let those themes sort of tell themselves rather than the characters almost directly pointing at the camera and sermonizing.
I I'm going to do that thing where I agree with you a little bit, but also not. I do agree with you that there is sort of this point where the movie does hit this point that it is like sort of lays all its cards on the table and is like, here's what's fucking going on. And I I didn't necessarily have a problem with that. I think it does that well enough, and I don't think it ever really fully lost the comedy. There's one moment in particular that I also didn't connect with as much. However, I saw this movie with four different women who were sobbing at this point, and so like I think it still has that. I don't know. I think it has this earnestness that it can connect with its core demographic in a way. And I'm not saying that, we didn't get it because we're dudes or whatever. I'm just saying that, like, you
I'm
know,
also willing to put out there, like specifically the emotional story arc,
mhm.
um, specifically that and the way it pays off at the very, very end. I'm willing to say maybe we didn't get that because we're dudes.
Yeah. Well,
Like, I think I have a pretty good take on the movie as a whole, and I feel like I know what they're going for and what they did, and I think they did it pretty well overall. But that was the only element of the movie that I felt was a little underwritten.
but
Um,
I also think that it's cool to see a movie on this scale that was directed by a woman, starring women, for women. Like
mhm.
I you know think it's fully fair that there's so many movies that we can probably connect to on an emotional level differently than most women can. And so I still got that. I just was like, oh, this moment isn't for me. I can still feel it. I can still acknowledge it, but it's not for me.
Right.
And I was fine with that. Like, I actually kind of liked that. I actually like the fact that everyone that I was with, who was a woman, felt it so deeply. I was like, hell yeah. Like, that made me appreciate it even more.
Right. It also helps to know, um, the more you know about the history of the toy line, and the more you know about the creator of Barbie, the original creator of the toy, and things like that, um,
Hmm.
that's all going to play into it. I mean, I think the movie doesn't require that much supplemental material. But if you've watched like the Toys That Made Us episode,
Yeah,
that's gonna do a lot of work.
there's some stuff, if you know kind of stuff in there.
Sure, yeah, and it's not deeply important, but it will mean
It
that much more
informs
to
it.
you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Also, the only other place in the movie where I felt like there was a tonal shift that kind of wasn't working,
Hmm.
um, is, and it's funny because we talked about him in the positive, but I didn't really understand the choice that Mattel and all of the suits that work in there feels just as manufactured in plastic as
Yeah.
Barbie
So,
Land. Like as I felt
agree
like
with
there
you
was a
there.
kind of a missed opportunity to do fish out of water shtick, but it was fish out of one tank of water into another tank of water.
I do agree with you there, and I was actually going to bring that up. Like I do think Will Ferrell and his crew of suits are funny, and there is comedy there, but I feel like it feels like we don't get that much of the real world. It feels like they come out of the real world, and there's this fun scene on the beach, and then there's some fun stuff with when Ryan Gosling is like researching the history of men and stuff like that. But
Yeah,
I do agree with you that I thought the tone of Mattel was a little weird, and I think that maybe I would have liked to see that played a little straighter,
right.
or
Because
for lack of a better word, but a little more realistically. Uh, and by the end, they can kind of once they follow them to Barbie Land, I think there's the opportunity for that transformation to make Mattel more plastic. But I do agree with you. I felt like when we were first introduced to Will Ferrell in that scene, it's a little it's a little jarring because it doesn't feel real, but we're supposed to be in the real world.
right, yeah, it sort of neutralizes the comedy because there's or the potential for comedy because there's no there's nothing being subverted. It's literally like I said, it's fish out of out of one tank of water into another tank of water.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there might have been some attempt at like a commentary on like uh the inauthenticity of corporate world or something like that, but
Well,
it
I
doesn't
think you can.
quite work.
I think you can play that in a way that's different from what we get in Barbie Land, right? Like
Yeah,
if it's going to be this sort of fake corporate world, give me a little more Brazil in that.
right.
And I think we get that a little bit with like the cubicles being designed in this, sort of like looks like metropolis fashion. But then it's quickly sort of abandoned for um, like Will Ferrell in a pink tie. And I agree. I was a little. I felt like to me that's the only thing that really sort of stuck out to me as what I would call a flaw.
Yeah, I mean, it was. I kind of wish the movie would have mined potential for those what the fuck moments
Yeah.
during that stretch of the movie. Um, but it ultimately kind of just comes back to Barbie Land and like the fate of Barbie Land anyway. So
Yeah,
that's not
pretty
the
quickly.
end all
Yeah.
be all. Um, but yeah, largely speaking, I enjoyed the movie. I had a good time with it. People are going to have a good time with it, I think, for the most part.
Man,
Um,
I this was the most crowded I have seen my theater in forever. Like I could not, it was so hard for me to find like multiple seats together for a showing. Everyone in the lobby was wearing pink. Like it is fun to see something that we know is going to be a cultural touchstone. Like that's
Right.
exciting to me, and to see that be so big and feminine and campy and weird. Like there's some weird, like very cinematic choices, like the some of the musical numbers and things like that that are just so much fun.
Right.
That
And the musical
that
choices, I mean, yeah, I think I brought this up during, uh, Lady Bird as well, that Gerwig has this, like, great ear for knowing exactly what song needs to be at this moment. That's not the usual go-to. It's like she knows how to play very, for lack of a better word, uncool music in a way that like really stands out.
there's one in particular that literally just thinking about that scene is making me laugh.
Right. Yeah. I know which one.
Yeah.
The stuff on the beach is a lot of fun. I mean,
Mhm.
it's a good time at the movies. I think it has some story problems. And I do think it gets a little bogged down with the messaging at a point. Not because I'm against the messaging,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
because I think it could have come more from a comedic place than a finger pointy place.
Sure.
Um so for me it's a B, but a pretty solid B.
Oh, I'm giving this an A minus. I like I said, like I agree with you. It's not perfect, um, but it solidly delivers on its promise and its premise, and it just has me so excited that it's doing so well. So yeah, A minus for me.
Yeah, I was hoping that it was going to be the unofficial third in the trilogy that is Clueless, the Brady Bunch movie, and then this. And it didn't quite become that, but it's pretty close. It might be the unofficial third in the Josie and the Pussycat Zoolander in this.
Yeah, but I still think this is kind of like I get what you're saying, but it's funny because while I was watching this movie, I was like, part of me was like, this movie shouldn't be doing so well. This needs to be a cult classic. Like it, like this needs to be discovered by audiences in 10 years. Um, but
Well,
I
here's
also,
also, like for as well as it's doing, it was made for $150, 150 million, which is not as big as the biggest thing that comes out anymore, but still a
mhm,
very expensive movie. It is more than made its money back, but
yeah.
even on the marketing. But if this wasn't Barbie, I mean, if it was just called Fantasy Doll Land or
Yeah.
something, or
Yeah, if it was a riff on Barbie without the brand recognition. Mhm.
would it be it's almost a cult classic that was kind of led into the gala through the back door.
Sure. Yeah, I think that's what excites me so much about it is it is so sort of strange in that way, but yeah, I think it's a blast. I'm sure if you've probably seen it by now, and you might have seen it multiple times by now, enjoy the summer of Barbie.
All right. Let's go ahead and get into the next segment. Before we talk about our streaming homework, I did devise a game that we could play.
Okay.
Uh, this is a little unlike some of the other quizzes I've presented with you before. The rules are a little different. You might have
Okay.
played something like it before. I'm going to give you two clues for two different movies,
Okay.
and they will combine to give you one title. So,
Okay.
as an example, it would go something like this. Clue number one: Disney's animated reimagining of Hamlet in Africa is.
The Lion King.
A giant ape falls for movie actress.
King Kong. So the Lion King Kong.
That's correct.
Okay.
So I have a few of these, and we'll see how you do.
Okay.
Okay. Number 1, a Western whodunit mystery trapped in a snowy mountain haberdashery.
Okay.
Clue number 2, Joe Pesci hitman comedy about missing luggage containing sensitive evidence.
The Hateful Eight Heads in a Duffel Bag.
Yes. Most of these are fairly easy, so. Okay, number 2, an alien visit Wisconsin widow in the form of her late husband. Clue
Okay.
number 2, French king confronts imprisoned twin brother in swashbuckling revenge tale.
What? Okay.
If you need me to repeat one, just let me know.
I'm stuck on the first clue.
An
Yeah,
alien visit Wisconsin widow in the form of her late husband. Cruel French king confronts imprisoned twin brother in swashbuckling revenge tale.
okay, the second one is Man in the Iron Mask, right?
I'm not going to say.
Uh I don't know what the first one is. Oh God. Starman in the Iron Mask?
You got it.
I've never seen Starman, so I had to. That one was tricky.
Okay. This is the third combination. Fictional 1960s Pennsylvania band becomes short-lived one-hit wonders. Clue number 2, racial divides come to a head on the hot summer streets nearby a Brooklyn pizza diner.
That thing you do the right thing.
Almost a palindrome.
That's good.
Number 4, every morning starts life over from the same point for this smarmy weatherman. Clue number 2, a group of military survivors try emotional experiments on zombie prisoner.
Groundhog Day of the Dead.
It's fairly straightforward. So far, so good. I almost stumped you with the second one, but...
Yeah.
All right.
What? Okay. Oh, all right. Let's try this. I'm gonna see if I can get it from just the first clue.
You won't. I promise.
I would have gotten the last one. I was already thinking, okay, Groundhog Day, what movie starts with day? I think I could have got the last one. So let's just try it, and if I need the second clue, I'll ask for it.
Okay. Young comic book reader becomes homemade superhero to take down local mafia.
Okay. Okay. What movie starts with ass? All right. Give me the second clue.
Powerful Templar gathers clues from the genetic memories of his ancestors.
Kick Assassin's Creed. God damn it.
And I knew you were going to immediately regret that.
I wasn't thinking assassins. I was thinking ass.
Okay. A pregnant housewife becomes suspicious about her secretive neighbors and their unconventional prenatal advice.
Okay. Rosemary's Baby's Day Out.
Mute speedster helps criminals escape heist operations.
Damn it. Rosemary's Baby Driver.
Okay, number 7. Elderly man reminds his wife with Alzheimer's about the story of their young love.
Okay. The Notebook of Eli.
2 teenage girls decide to party the night before graduation to make up for all the time they wasted getting good grades.
The Notebook Smart.
Okay, last one here. Loosely autobiographical movie musical about the success and romance of 80s pop icon.
Oh. Okay, what? Can I get that one more time?
Loosely autobiographical movie musical about the success and romance of 80s pop icon.
Okay.
Clue number 2. Los Angeles yuppie becomes the legal guardian of his autistic older brother he never knew.
Oh, Purple Rain Man.
That is correct. So you have to have both clues, because if you don't get it from the first one, you get it from the second one.
Yeah. And I would have got, I'm telling you, I would have got Groundhog Day of the Dead.
Yeah, I probably could have made that a little harder, but I decided not to. I was also writing these while I was at work.
This is good. I feel like I'm ready for Doug Loves Movies.
It is a very Doug Loves Movies kind of game.
Let's invite him on and play it with him.
You're the comedian, so you got to make it happen.
Fair enough.
All right, let's go ahead and move on to the streaming homework, which I assigned you the last episode we did. And that is the 1994 Hong Kong film by Wong Kar-wai, Chungking Express. And I'll let you set that up.
Yeah. This one's kind of interesting. So it's sort of 2 stories in one movie. The first one is about this cop who is recently broken up with, who encounters a mysterious woman who is doing some nefarious activity with drug smuggling, and how their lives cross paths for a brief moment, for brief potential romance that never sort of gets fully developed. And then we shift gears to another police officer who is going through a breakup, who has a sort of unconventional romance with this quirky waitress who ends up breaking into his house and rearranging all of his furniture and just like changing weird little things in a way that helps him emotionally move on from his previous relationship.
Right. So they're both stories about young, hopelessly romantic police officers The first one is more sort of a detective, and it kind of plays out a little bit like a detective noir that sort of morphs into something else.
Mm-hmm.
And this one, the second story, is also about a police officer and who also has sort of a happenstance romance. And it's kind of interesting how the two stories that it's bifurcated in this way, or like directly in the middle point of the movie, we go from one story to another, and they sort of mirror each other in interesting ways, but they
Mm-hmm.
also uh, tell their stories in different ways. Like the first film, the first short film, if you will, or first vignette,
Mm-hmm.
uh, there relies a lot more on voiceover to talk about this past relationship he was in, the way he feels, what he's expecting from these relationships. You know, he has all of these ideas about uh, things that expire, whether it's food or, you know, romance or time that goes by or these missed opportunities. And then the second story almost has none of that, almost has
Mm-hmm.
no voiceover, and it's told all through the actions of the characters. Almost to the point where when we see the young waitress, and this is the only thing that ties the story together, is everyone sort of meets up at this little bodega sandwich shop
Mm-hmm.
in Hong Kong, and everyone sort of crossed paths there. But uh, almost to the point that when she starts breaking into his apartment and cleaning things and they just barely miss each other, I'm like, is he imagining all this? Is this like some fantasy he's having?
Oh,
And then
interesting.
the movie, I think more or less confirms that what we were seeing was in fact uh, real. But but yeah, it's relying way less on sort of directing the audience into the thoughts and actions of the characters.
I do think it was interesting that, yeah, both of the males in these relationships are similar, uh in that, you know, they're both these hopeless romantic police officers, and then both the female leads are very different. Like, one is, like you said, the first one feels almost like noir. Like, I felt like there was going to be more to do with the fact that he was a cop, and because she
She was a
was like,
criminal.
yeah,
Yeah.
because she was doing some pretty like
Crazy
nefarious
stuff.
shit.
Yeah.
Um, and so I thought that choice was interesting. And then I had a kind of a hard time when the movie shifted gears, because I didn't realize this movie was structured that way.
Right.
And so the fact that the main girl in the first story, the main actress, is wearing this wig and glasses and like this dark overcoat, I was like, is this the same woman? And she's just like at this restaurant as like a cover or whatever. So when it shifted gears to another story, I was like, oh, like it kind of took me out for a little bit. Um, and then, you know, once I realized what was going on, I was able to kind of get back into it. But I don't know, structurally it was very interesting.
Yeah, I was a little bit more prepared for that to happen because uh I had seen Quentin Tarantino had he did a like way back in the 90s. Um he had did an introduction for the movie when it was released in America. And then they just took those introductions and put them on YouTube without the movie part.
Mm-hmm.
So he talked a lot about like the actors and stuff and Wong Kar Wai's other films and blah blah blah. Um, and he had mentioned that there was two stories in this movie, and that there was another movie called Fallen Angels, I believe, which is a feature-length film, but was originally intended to be the third story for this
Oh,
film. But he felt like he had enough. Wong Kar-wai felt like he had enough with these two, that he didn't need to do that one, so he just made that as a third separate feature. But it thematically, it like ties in a little. Um,
interesting.
but yeah, so I was a little prepared for that. But knowing that, I was also like, oh, okay. So I mean, you can clearly see the American influence on this film. I think.
Yeah, yeah.
I
Well, I
mean,
mean,
Hong Kong has always been very East meets West meets East again. Like that's like their stuff traveled a lot more than other parts of China. Largely because Hong Kong is like this sort of fairly modernized American styled city in the middle of China that is for the most part fairly capitalistic and things like that. Um, and there's a ton of branding all over the movie. I really love the way that Wong Kar Wai uses signage. Like
mhm.
big McDonald's, big Circle K, big we see all these American icons, Garfield, things like that, like all throughout the movie.
Well, and the music too.
The music choices, yeah.
There's a direct references to um also like going to California and living in California, and the in the first story, um the female protagonist, when we're introduced to her, she's speaking English. There's this American looking guy working at the bar. Yeah, there's you can it feels pretty Western in as far as sensibility goes.
Yeah, and I think it was almost like him, and I haven't seen a lot of his work, generally speaking, but uh it almost felt like he was like throwing his hat in the ring of like what was happening in Europe and the United States with like the indie boom, because it
Hmm.
fits really well in there, like in that sort of style of movies like Pulp Fiction, which would have been the same year, so maybe not that, but like movies like that, and the Train Spotting, and uh the sort of slacker films from that era and things like that. That sort of has that sort of looseness to narrative where it's not typically narrative, but
Hmm.
it is more of a mood piece involving characters, and it has that sort of youthful ennui that a lot of those movies from that era was about, while also having a conscious, the fact that they're cops and police and all of that, like a conscious connection to the history of Hong Kong crime movies,
Hmm.
but without becoming one exactly.
Yeah, yeah. I also think it's funny that like I had a harder time connecting with the second story at first. But once I got into it, I actually found those characters to just be much more interesting, and that story to be more interesting, because of that. The first story, like I never felt a,
Mm-hmm.
even the first vignette sort of feels like two stories that are sort of just happening simultaneously, because the characters don't even really come together till the end, and they don't have the same connection as the second story, so it does almost feel like three different stories in one. um I think that's why I thought there was going to be a little bit more of a crossover or a tension within that first one, with him being a cop and her being a criminal. And I think, as far as all of the stuff we're talking about, the second vignette is just more satisfying. And
It feels more complete. It feels like it has a fuller arc.
yeah, and it just it feels more like a character study. Like the waitress is very unique. The cop is he's a little more he's a little less of a sad sack. Like he's depressed, but he's also kind of likable and quirky in his own way. Whereas the first guy I just kind of thought was annoying. um,
I really like the actor who played the detective. I thought that he was really charismatic, but yeah, I don't think he
well,
didn't.
just that character, just wasn't as much going on with that character. He was just sort of like, oh, I'm sad.
Well, he seems much younger. And
Yeah,
I mean, I feel like they're probably close to the same age, but he's written to feel, I think, almost more like kind of a college age. Like he's 25, I think he says in the movie, but he
yeah,
feels,
like he just turned 25.
yeah, he kind of feels more like an archetypically sort of young, lossless, listless kind of person who's putting all his eggs in one basket kind of thing and sort of living life a little bit more um without any direction, whereas the second guy feels like he probably maybe went through more because we get
Hmm.
a full scene of him and his ex-girlfriend, the flight attendant.
I think that was
um
another reason why I was able to sort of
'Cause
relate to his character more. Like the first guy kept talking about how he was sad that May wasn't calling him, and then he goes to the little restaurant and there's a waitress there who's working and her name is also May. So I was like kind of confused there, like, oh, that's not his ex, because
right.
he was clearly like not interested in her. And so I just think that the storytelling was cleaner in the second story. Like I liked that we got this backstory of his romance with the flight attendant, and to just see how much it hurt him, uh without him just complaining about it the whole time.
Right, and we get a lot of indications that he's depressed and that
Yeah,
he
oh yeah.
won't he won't clean his apartment or he won't fix it because he wants it to stay the same, and he keeps the soap that he had even though it's like shrinking every day.
He's just
There's lots of indicators about time and passage of time in this movie.
yeah.
Um, but as a character, he's a lot more sort of like, I'm an adult with a job. He's not in street clothes. He's wearing a uniform,
Well, and
and
I just
he
I think
presents a lot more confidently outwardly when he's not in his apartment.
yeah,
So,
his depression, it his breakup, his heartbreak is just seems a little more nuanced and a
mhm,
little more real to me. Um, because he only sort of expresses that, yeah, when he's alone in his apartment talking about, his torn dish rag crying and stuff. And when he's out, he won't even like take the letter and things like that to signify any kind of like hurt.
right, yeah. Which at first I wasn't sure exactly what his initial uh feelings were about that letter and like keeping it or not keeping it. Like I almost thought he was like trying to like sort of underplay um this person so that he had a better chance with the waitress.
Oh, really?
Um
Oh, no, I could tell pretty much right away that he just didn't want it to be real. That's what it felt like to me. Was he just, as soon as he reads this letter, as soon as he acknowledges then it becomes real. Then she's actually gone. Then she's not hiding in his apartment. She's just, that's it.
yeah, I mean I think that plays itself out. Um But yeah, I really enjoyed the movie a lot, and I think one of the things that Wong Kar-wai is really well known for, in all of his movies, is his cinematography and his use of color and his use of lighting. And there's a lot of handheld in this movie, especially that first half. The second half feels a little bit more like there's a lot more stationary set pieces, but the first half there's a lot of kind of kinetic camera work and moving
like
through spaces.
Yeah, this like slow motion, like sort of shaky cam thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and especially like really playing up to the cramped, small locations in this movie. And putting us right in there in the middle of it. But I think the movie has a ton of style. And I mean, if you don't walk away from this movie without California Dreams playing in your head, or the that cover of, I think, Dreams by the Cranberries.
Yeah.
Which, fun fact, was performed by the actress Faye Wong, I believe, who plays the waitress. She's apparently a like big pop star in Hong Kong at that time.
Oh, that's fun.
And so that Chinese cover, which sounds just like
until
the original, until you start like listening to the lyrics.
Yeah, until you realize, oh, this is in Chinese.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I almost thought like maybe the Cranberries like recorded a Chinese version because they thought it would do really well overseas or something. But yeah, it I really like the way that there's a few songs that keep playing over and over, and they sort of become themes for the characters.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I mean, on a whole, I just think it's a really cool, stylish, kind of indie flavored Hong Kong film.
Yeah, I liked this much more than the Rules of Attraction.
I don't know what those have to do with each other exactly, but
just kind of similar time period and
sure.
Like you said, just that sort of youthful ennui. No, yeah, I thought this was pretty cool. Like I said, there were some moments that would kind of throw me for a loop, but the storytelling was able to reel me back in again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that is everything that we're talking about today. What movie did you want to assign for the streaming homework for next week?
We are going to watch the Paul Newman hockey comedy Slapshot, which is streaming on Netflix.
Yes, which obviously one of the most popular sports movies of all times. I can't say that I've entirely seen it. I know it's one of those things that was like a perennial on cable and things like that, so I'm sure I've seen some of it. But we'll see how much of it I recall as I'm watching it. But if anybody has anything to say about any of the things we talked about in this podcast or previous, you can get in touch with us through our email at MacGuffinPod@gmail.com. You can also follow us on Twitter or X, whatever we're calling it now.
No, it's Twitter. No, don't let X. No. Stop trying to make X happen. It's not going to happen.
Twitter or Instagram under MacGuffin Pod. We're also on Letterboxd, where we update people with the movies that we are talking about. I don't rate them, and I don't know if that's hurting us or not on Letterboxd. Probably, because people like to read the reviews, but I just want people to get the reviews here rather than, reading a blurb on. And, for films where we have entirely different opinions, it's not really, feasible. But, you can see what we're talking about and what we're going to talk about as our streaming homework on Letterboxd. So if you look us up on Letterboxd, you should be able to find us. We also have a TikTok, which I occasionally update, and we're going to start trying to get some clips on YouTube. So that's all under MacGuffin Pod. Be sure to read my reviews for the Idaho State Journal, and you can do that by Googling Idaho State Journal movie reviews or Idaho State Journal Arts and Entertainment. And be sure to leave us a 1-sentence review and a 5-star rating at whatever podcast app you're using to listen to us on, iTunes or Spotify or Google Podcasts, whatever. And you can read the other reviews and articles by the rest of the MacGuffin staff at mcguff.in.
You can also follow me on Twitter. That's what it is. And Instagram at Keith Foster Kid. And also, if you're interested in seeing me perform improv, I perform the show Improv versus Stand Up, which is weekly, and occasionally another show called Lyrics and Laughs, which is kind of a similar format, but instead of stand-up comedians, we have cabaret singers come and we do improv based on the songs they sing. It's a lot of fun. You can check them out at mockingbirdimprov.com or .org. Yeah.
Okay, and that is the episode.
To be honest, when I found out the patriarchy wasn't just about horses, I lost interest.
Bye.